Today on American Strangeness, we investigate the strange history of American dragons. Imagine for a moment that the year is 1882 and you're a passenger on a Southern Pacific Express steam locomotive, barreling across the unforgiving landscape of the Colorado Desert on your way from Yuma, Arizona to Los Angeles. You've just passed the oasis of Dos Palmas, a historically important watering hole so named for its distinctive pair of palm trees, when you gaze out the window and see something inexplicable and unsettling. About a half-mile ahead, what looks like a column of sand is moving slowly from east to west. It is only a short distance from the railroad track, and traveling at a pace that you calculate will meet the train in certain collision. As you dig your fingernails into your seat and just manage to choke out a gasp, you discern that it's not a column of sand but some kind of strange animal. It is moving perpendicular to the oncoming train, tail dragging on the ground and propelled by two large wings near its head. The bird, snake, or whatever it is, looks to be about 30 feet long and 12 inches in diameter. Your fellow passengers, having noticed this strange and terrifying sight, push their heads out the windows and hang onto the outside railings to get a better look. According to the Los Angeles Times, this is exactly what happened to a Southern Pacific train on January 17, 1882, relayed by the engineer and a fireman and corroborated by passengers when the train arrived in Los Angeles later that night. They said that when the flying snake reached the track, the swiftly moving train clipped off a portion of its tail. This painful offense enraged the enormous serpent, and it flew after its steel attacker 2 miles faster than chain lightning. The angry animal overtook the locomotive in moments and, striking from a position of safety above, gave the train a lively thrashing, roaring like a cow in distress all the time. As women and children screamed, the beast shattered several windows in its onslaught. The serpent then pulled back and sailed off. Given a moment to recover, several passengers unholstered their pistols and unleashed a shower of lead after the beast as wind whistled past the damaged window frames. The bullets, if they hit their target at all, had no effect as the monster winged its way back across the desert sands. This is vouched for by everyone who was on the train and is given for what it is worth, stated the Times. This flying serpent isn't a rare and isolated tale. Rather, it's an early example of a rich tradition of winged reptilian monsters that supposedly terrorized America's western territories and wild environs during the back half of the 19th and early 20th centuries. These American dragons, as Strange magazine editor Mark Chorvinsky dubbed them in a 2000 article, generated numerous headlines across the United States during this period. Chorvinsky didn't give much credence to the editors of Western newspapers when it came to such monster stories, or their assertion that the witnesses to such tales were reliable. Indeed, it was an era of American journalism when even major newspapers ran stories of sea serpents, ape-like wild men, and haunted houses alongside more sober reporting on politics, crime, and daily life. It can be hard to discern which articles documenting strange events were spun purely from imagination, and which might have been built around a core of truth, possibly sourced from honest yet befuddled eyewitnesses. Chorvinsky suggested that these American dragons were an amalgamation of European dragon legends, Native American belief in the Thunderbird as an avian storm deity, and the complicated lore of the Piazza, the pre-European mural of a dragon-like creature once painted on a bluff along the Mississippi River at present-day Alton, Illinois. Fitting America's image of a mixing pot, this stew of legends might have solidified into something new. I think there is another important influence in the composite of the American dragon. Pteranodon, discovered in 1871 by Yale paleontologist Othniel Charles Marsh within a chalk formation in western Kansas. This was the first discovery of a pterosaur in North America, or outside Europe for that matter, and it was the largest known genus of the species known at the time, boasting a wingspan of over 20 feet. As evidenced by newspapers of the day, this scientific find captured the public imagination and continued to do so for decades to come. For example, a 1906 San Francisco Examiner article illustrated what this most enormous bird of all would have looked like next to a man in a trolley car. Now, let's take a look at some of the American dragons that were reported during the 1800s and 1900s. An early account emerged from Santiago, Chile in March of 1868, translated and printed in U.S. newspapers. After completing their day at the Garin mine, workers gathered for their evening meal and were stunned by the approach of an unknown creature of the air, the Roc of the 1001 Nights perhaps, or possibly a Leviathan of the deserts. As it flew over their heads, the miners witnessed a chimera that had great wings covered in brown plumage, a grasshopper-like head with enormous eyes wide open and brilliant as stars, and covered with something like hair or bristles, and a long, serpentine body covered with shiny scales that emitted metallic sounds as the strange animal flew. Some, but not all of the miners perceived a detestable smell, like burning arsenic. While some of the men called it the devil, others recalled the passage of a similar animal over the mine years earlier. Sky serpents, perhaps ethereal in nature, were reported over Bonham, Texas, and Fort Scott, Kansas in June 1873. Witnesses in Texas described something resembling an enormous serpent floating in a cloud, as large and as long as a telegraph pole, and of a yellow striped color. It moved without effort, coiling up, turning over, and thrusting its head forward to strike, displaying the maneuvers of a genuine snake. In Kansas, the sky serpent encircled the rising sun and was visible for several moments. Thomas Campbell, Joseph Howard, two woodchoppers, were plying their trade in the timber 5 miles northeast of Hurlton, California, on March 10, 1882, when they were startled by the sound of many wings flapping in the air. Not more than 40 feet above the treetops, they saw what looked like a crocodile, 18 feet in length, head to tail. It flew by means of 6 fluttering wings along the length of its body, each about 15 inches broad and shaped like a duck's foot. The creature had 12 legs. Howard fired his shotgun at the monster, and the bullets bounced off as if striking sheet iron, leaving it uninjured. In August 1885, farmer James Vincent Sr. and several friends from nearby Fletcher, Illinois, battled a gigantic air serpent that was attempting to devour Vincent's sheep. The massive winged snake worked in unison with 3 smaller snakes, each 18 to 20 feet in length. The trio snatched a lamb and slithered toward the larger snake, but released their hold when one of the men tossed a fence rail at them. The smaller snakes attacked the men and were repelled, but once again grabbed the lamb. This time they succeeded in depositing it in the hungry king snake's jaws. The men fired several shots at the large snake. It appeared stunned but unharmed, and the smaller snakes retreated into its mouth. The big snake then unfurled its wings and struggled to maneuver around the property's hedge fences before finally gaining enough height to fly away. Elizabeth Lake in California was said to be inhabited by a foul monster whose presence was announced by a volcanic rumbling and a penetrating odor arising from the seething, boiling water. In one account, the smell was described as, quote, something between sour gas and a German bakery. Its roar sounded like the muttering of distant thunder and could have curdled the blood of a mummy. The slimy beast was about 30 feet long, with skin of a warm reddish color, a long snout, and a crooked row of jagged yellow fangs. It sported enormous bat wings, long hind legs, and a barbed tail. A shaggy yellow mane hung over the monster's giant head and neck. Its emerald eyes, the size of dinner plates, gleamed like 2 horrid fires. A proboscis darted back and forth between the eyes. A prospector was nearly eaten by the beast on July 4, 1886, but he didn't agree with it, and the monster instead dined on 3 cows and a hog. Peter B. Simpson, an emigrant from Nevada, was camping on the upper end of the lake on July 15, 1886, when the monster gave him and his family a rude awakening. The beast lifted their wagon, carried it about 20 yards, and dropped it onto the plain, wrecking the wheels and sending the cattle into a panic. The monster then attacked and bit clean through an antelope with its horrid jaws. Gun in hand, Simpson followed the beast and took a shot, but the bullet rebounded off its hide. Simpson later recovered a few round, semi-transparent scales about the size of dinner plates, reddish and glazed like ground glass. Carrying the freshly mutilated antelope in its fearsome mouth, the monster rose into the air and splashed down into the lake like a cannonball. Weeks after news broke of the Elizabeth Lake monster, the Los Angeles Herald competitively claimed its own amphibious beast had taken up residence and was eating all the large fish in Reservoir Number 5 in East Los Angeles. Major Horace Bell, a Los Angeles ranger, soldier, lawyer, and newspaperman, expanded the Lake Elizabeth monster saga in his 1930 book, On the Old West Coast, being further reminiscences of a ranger. Bell wrote that the monster had been scaring away settlers from its valley since the 1830s, emerging from its muddy home to feast on any horses and cattle unsuspecting ranchers brought its way. In 1886, a new resident named Don Felipe Rivera emptied his Colt 44 into the monster's side, the shots echoing like they had struck a great iron kettle. Rivera later found his flattened bullets. In this account, the monster was 44 feet long, as large as 4 elephants, is what it said, with a head like a bulldog, wings that sat flat on its back when at rest, and possibly 6 legs. Bell said that following several sightings between 1881 and 1886, the Elizabeth Lake monster departed its watery home and flew eastward, where it was eventually killed on the desert outside Tombstone, Arizona. On April 26, 1890, the Tombstone Weekly Epitaph published what has become the most infamous American dragon story, titled Found on the Desert. According to the article, 2 ranchers traveling on the desert between the Whetstone and Wahuca Mountains encountered a winged monster resembling a huge alligator with an extremely elongated tail and an immense pair of wings. Evidently exhausted by a long flight, the creature flew only short distances at a time. The men pursued the animal for several miles on horseback, finally shooting it down with their Winchester rifles. The ranchers cautiously approached the dead monster, measuring its length at 92 feet and its wingspread at 160 feet. Its eyes, large as dinner plates, protruded halfway from its head. The beast's head was 8 feet long, and its jaws were lined with strong, sharp teeth. Its smooth skin and thick wings, composed of transparent membrane, were devoid of feathers or hair. The men sliced off a small portion of a wingtip to take back to Tombstone as proof of their kill. There, they gathered several prominent men to return and skin the creature, with plans to ship the hide back east for examination by eminent scientists of the day. In the summer 1970 edition of Old West magazine, reader Harry F. McClure insisted in a letter that during his youth in Lordsburg, New Mexico, he knew the ranchers who were involved in the incident outside nearby Tombstone. McClure said the flying monster's wingspan was closer to 20 or 30 feet in reality, and the cowboys had been too far out of range with their low-velocity rifles to kill it. The story resurfaced in the May 1963 issue of Saga magazine, with the event shifted to 1886 and the dragon replaced by a smaller, yet still enormous bird of prey with a 36-foot wingspan. This account added the detail that several men in Tombstone were photographed standing in front of the bird, which was suspended from a building for the shot. Decades later, countless people have memories of seeing this photograph, despite it never appearing in the Tombstone epitaph and no one being able to produce a copy. The creature, whatever its form, has become known as the Tombstone Thunderbird. In June 1890, a San Diego boy named Jimmy Diller was playing on the hills of Balboa Park when he saw an enormous and monstrous half-bird, half-beast flying through the air with bat-like wings, a long bill, and a tail twisted like a donut. Diller ducked to the ground, the beast missing him as it flapped overhead and disappeared eastward at great speed. The boy ran home and announced, "Papa, I have just seen the devil." Upon seeing an illustration of the Tombstone monster printed recently in the San Francisco Examiner, Diller declared it looked just like the creature he had encountered. A San Diego man named Mr. Marvin witnessed a similar monster the very same day over Switzer Canyon near 28th Street, and was said to have sworn to it on a stack of Bibles. A pair of pterodactyls, who survived to the modern age, were reported to inhabit the vast swampland around Tulare Lake outside of Selma and Fresno, California, in the summer of 1891. Witnesses described them as resembling featherless birds, about 6 feet long, with wingspans of at least 15 feet. Accounts conflicted on whether the creatures had long, wide bills or snouts like alligators, their teeth visible as they flew around and snapped their jaws. They emitted cries somewhat like swans. Their heads were broad and their eyes no less than 4 inches in diameter. The pterodactyls dined heartily on ducks, mud hens, and farm chickens, biting their prey in two. While wading in the water, they looked not unlike gigantic frogs, their folded wings appearing like large knobs on their backs. The creatures left tracks in the mud that revealed their feet to resemble those of an alligator, but more circular in shape. Each foot had 5 toes and a large claw, with the tracks being 11 inches wide and 19 inches long. This news generated significant debate, with later articles insisting the story was a hoax, an exaggeration or misidentification of large, flightless, volatile birds, possibly the southern cassowary, imported from Australia by colonists in Sequoia National Park as defense against U.S. cavalry troops trying to evict them. The indigenous Chelan and Entiat people of Washington state told stories of a deadly dragon who resided in the upper waters of Lake Chelan, attacking any canoe that came near. It appeared again in 1895 with a report of a great white dragon that snatched a wader by the leg. The man's companions attempted to free him by dragging the monster's belly over a fire, but it broke free, flew up 200 feet, and plunged back into the lake with its victim. The Lake Chelan dragon was described as having the legs and body of an alligator and the head and restless eyes of a serpent. There were large bat-like wings, ribbed and leathery on its back, and the beast had a scaly tail. The monster was mostly white aside from the underpart of its throat and the tips of its wings, feet, and tail. Its skin was as soft as velvet. The monster was seen again in 1905 as a 75-foot serpentine creature at the head of the lake. Following a tragic accident in which a school bus plunged into the icy lake in 1945, recovery divers encountered a fish larger than any man. Remote Stansbury Island in Utah's Great Salt Lake was said to harbor a horse-eating monster in 1903. The creature had a head like an alligator, nearly 15 feet long, with a wide mouth filled with immense serrated teeth. Its large, round eyes burned with a bright red light. It flew via bat-like wings that spanned approximately 100 feet. Its body was between 50 to 65 feet long head to tail, and was completely encrusted with salt that caused the dragon to glimmer like a rainbow in the sun. Bullets had no effect on its armored hide. It had short forelegs and jumped using its hind legs and tail. The aquatic beast possessed a short, fish-like tail, moving quickly in the water and presumably feeding on shrimp. Its cry, half snort and half roar, inspired fear. It left 5-toed footprints, like the imprint of a giant hand nearly 4 feet across the palm. 2 hunters, Martin Gilbert and John Barry, tracked the monster to its lair, an immense cave near the head of a narrow gulch. Hiding behind boulders to observe the monster, Gilbert and Barry witnessed the creature fly off and return with a horse in its mouth, which it settled down to devour, crunching the equine's bones with each bite. There might be a connection between the Salt Dragon and the Keith O'Brien Company department store in Salt Lake City. The first article about the creature in the Salt Lake Telegram ran alongside an advertisement for the department store's excursion to Provo Canyon and various products. The next day, the newspaper ran an illustration of the Salt Dragon branded with the Keith O'Brien Company logo. In the notorious case of the Van Meter visitor, a winged monster straight out of a horror movie menaced the Iowa town in the fall of 1903. The visitor appeared half human and half beast with great bat-like wings, leaping from building to building. It disarmed panicked residents with its stupefying odor and a dazzling light it beamed from a blunt, horn-like protuberance in the middle of its forehead. One night, a Van Meter man saw the creature climb down a telephone pole using its beak like a parrot, and then leap away like a kangaroo, finally soaring away on featherless wings. The monster left large 3-toed footprints in the soft earth. Finally, a posse of armed townspeople cornered the monster at an abandoned coal mine. It emerged with a smaller member of its species, but both fled back down the shaft when bullets started flying. Residents of Van Meter were apparently incensed by the articles reporting this bizarre incident, which they said was simply an exaggerated account of disruptions caused by a nighttime robber or prankster shining a light in windows. However, Van Meter has now embraced the monster lore and today holds an annual festival in its honor. As the American frontier faded into history, the dragons inhabiting its most untamed regions appeared to go extinct. Like old maps that warned European sailors of the gnarling sea beasts lurking in unexplored realms, familiarity sapped away the magic our imaginations assigned to the U.S. unknown. Perhaps these dragons are just dormant in the primitive region of our brains, an instinctual relic protecting us from prehistoric predators. Lest you get too complacent the next time you're on a train speeding through the desert, keep your eyes and ears alert for the strange rippling of sand and the frantic fluttering of leathery wings.